No Austin Matthews? No problem. The Leafs go into Boston and win 2-1 in overtime, and now the series has shifted back to Toronto for Thursday night's game. Mark Masters joins us from the Toronto Maple Leafs practice facility in Toronto. Okay, so Mark, the question everybody's asking right now, did Austin Matthews skate today, and how's he looking in terms of a potentially skating in the critical game now Thursday night in Toronto to stay alive again against the Bruins?
Well, Sheldon Keefe was asked if Austin Matthews is a possibility to play in Game 6, and he said Austin skated and no further update. So not much to go on there, but I guess good news that he's back on the ice. I can tell you he skated more today than he did yesterday before Game 5. I think he was on the ice for maybe around 30 minutes, and he was doing a lot more than he did yesterday. He was doing more skating, more shooting, just more of everything. So that's a good sign for the Leafs, and then we'll just have to wait and see. They should have a full skate, we expect, tomorrow morning before the game, and that will be our next kind of benchmark to see if Matthews is able to go in Game 6.
All right, Mark, so here's from my perspective, the really huge part of the victory, the 2-1 overtime victory for the Leafs. Yes, they had to win to stay alive, but secondly, they won with great D, not just great offense. 3 of their last 4 games they've won by scoring just 2 goals in the playoffs, which I think says an awful lot. How important was it for them to win this game just 2-1 to prove they can play defensively and not have to score 4 or 5 goals to win a game?
Well, frankly, they feel like they've played really well defensively in this series, especially on the road, even in Game 1, which they lost. The problem has been offense. They haven't been able to generate offense, even dating back to last year at the end of that playoff run. What is it now? They've played 12 straight playoff games with 3 goals or less scored in. They've only hit 3 goals once, and that was the game they won in this series, Game 2. So they have felt very good about their defensive play. They don't feel like they're giving away a lot. One of the things they're happiest with in this series is how they've played David Pastrnak, how they've made life tough on him. He hasn't really been able to break through with the odd exception here and there. So I guess it's nice to know that you can lock it down, especially with a new goalie in net and Joseph Woll, make his life easier. Only the 2 shots in the first period last night. And, of course, it's always good to be good defensively. You need that to win. I think any team does. They still have to figure out how to score a bit more and solve Jeremy Swayman moving forward.
Okay, I'm going to push back on this, Mark, because I'm not sure they have to score more. As I mentioned, 3 of their last 4 wins have come when they just scored only 2 goals. And here's the other part of it, Mark. 3 of those 4 wins, they all came on the road. For whatever reason, Mark, the Toronto Maple Leafs step on home ice and they can't win there in the playoffs. I get the sense, and maybe I'm wrong because you've been watching this a lot more closely than I have. I get the sense that the Leafs play completely differently on home ice because they feel like they want to keep the fans on their side. So they want to go out there and score. And in trying to score, they're taking potentially some unnecessary risks offensively, which then costs them giveaways, turnovers, and they get scored on. And then they find themselves in a hole. Could that be the reason the Leafs struggle so badly on home ice?
Okay, so a couple things to unpack there. The first thing I would say is that I think a lot of this team's identity is wrapped up in being able to score. They have the greatest goal scorer on the planet. Well, he wasn't in the lineup last night, but they usually have the greatest goal scorer on the planet in their lineup. Mitch Marner's a wizard with the puck, and William Nylander's a 40-goal, 98-point winger. And John Tavares, of course, is a guy who's got a lot of offensive upside as well, although he has slowed down. Morgan Riley, their best defenseman, really offensive-minded. So I feel like for them to really be at their best, they got to be scoring, certainly more than how they've been scoring in this run. They couldn't score last year. That's why they lost to Florida. They are not scoring enough in this series. That's why they're trailing 3-2. As to the whole home road thing, I would agree. I think that it was telling last year that they tried to put the players in a hotel before that Game 5 at home against Florida. They were so kind of desperate to get the road mindset at home. And I thought the most telling part of today's media availability from Sheldon Keefe was when he was asked by a local news reporter here a general question. What is it like? What does it mean to be back home and playing in front of this great, loyal Leafs fan base tomorrow? And Sheldon Keefe said, quite honestly, nothing. And we have to approach the game like it's a road game or any other game. We cannot get worried about trying to impress anyone. We have to play the way we played on the road in this series. And I feel like when they've played on the road, they've played a simpler game. They've been able to create more zone time, get on the forecheck, just be content to put the puck behind the Bruins and go to work. And, I think that's why, Sheldon Keefe was talking about how he made that comment that he had no problem with the effort in Game 4. And a lot of people were like, well, it didn't look that way. And he said, yeah, it doesn't look that way because our process is off. We look slower and everything's disjointed, which is why people question the effort. But really, the process was off. They have to have that road process, simplify things, and go to work at home, put their hard hats on, and that will be the key to snapping this 6-game losing streak at home in 7 of the last 8. Gino, 5 of the 7 times they've been eliminated in this era, they've been on home ice. And the other 2 are in Boston. So not a great stat there for the Leafs, but let's see if they can turn it around.
All right, speaking of history, I want to talk about the demons that come right now for both the Leafs and the Boston Bruins. Yeah, Leaf fans understand the scenario. Just one playoff series win since the core 4 came together, and that's just not good enough. But the Boston Bruins are also in a very difficult spot right now. They're facing a ton of pressure as well because they had this huge collapse against Florida last year. They set all kinds of records during the regular season last year. They were up huge on the Florida Panthers. They completely collapsed and got ousted in the opening round. How would you balance the pressure right now for that the Bruins are putting on themselves and that the Leafs are putting on themselves right now?
Well, usually you would think the team that's facing elimination is facing the most pressure, and certainly there is pressure on this Leafs team. But I think there's just as much pressure on the Boston Bruins right now to try and avoid a similar collapse from last year. I mean, it's kind of eerie, some of the similarities there in terms of the same kind of scenario has played out. They win 2 on the road to go up 3-1 in the series, come home, Game 5 on home ice, a chance to eliminate an opponent. By the way, that's changed their goaltenders. Of course, the Panthers went to Sergei Bobrovsky last year, which helped turn that series around for them. And then they lose Game 5 in overtime on home ice. And Brad Marchand, who had a breakaway at the end of Game 5 last year, had a great chance in the third period last night that he just shoveled over the net. And now all of a sudden you're going on the road on a road trip you did not want to go on. And your coach is taking heat. And last year, Jim Montgomery was taking heat for some of his lineup decisions. Yesterday, he switched a winning lineup. A lot of people, I can tell you, being in Boston, a lot of people in Boston aren't happy with Jim Montgomery right now. They think he kind of tempted fates by, taking Kevin Shattenkirk out, putting Matt Grzelcyk in. Grzelcyk did not look very confident. He got beat by John Tavares on that overtime goal. Take Johnny Beecher out of the lineup. He was one of their best face-off guys. They got dominated at the dot last night. Boston's taken a lot of heat. Brad Marchand, he was in the penalty box for the first time in this series last night. He's actually in the penalty box twice last night. He had only been in the penalty box once in the previous 12 playoff games he played. So all of a sudden, it really does feel like the Boston Bruins are under a lot of pressure in this series. Toronto too, but Boston just the same, Gino.
Joseph Woll, I can't let you go without talking about him. When we were talking about teeing up the previous game yesterday, you and I were talking about the fact that Joseph Woll has to completely stand on his head because Ilya Samsonov couldn't get it done. Joseph Woll's been spectacular. He just gave up 1 goal on 28 shots, nothing on the 5 shots he faced in the previous game, in game number 4. He's been absolutely brilliant. And my favorite part of it was to hear him talk after last night's game. This kid could not feel more relaxed. Am I wrong? Do you get the sense that he's just loving life right now, Mark?
Well, that's what he said. He said he's having the time of his life, starting an elimination game in Boston, where he played his college hockey for the Boston College Eagles there. And he allows 1 goal on 2 shots in the first. Not a great save percentage. So, you might think another goal he might get rattled. The goal that goes in is from his childhood pal, Trent Frederick. They know they go way back from their St. Louis days growing up together. Woll told me earlier this season that Frederick, for whatever reason, just has his number. But you know what? Woll stopped Frederick in the third period. Amazing save, season-saving save. Woll was excellent in the overtime when Boston got their chances early in the overtime period. He was ready for that moment last night, and it was the right call by Sheldon Keefe and the Leafs to go to him. He'll be back in tomorrow, no doubt about that. But also just think about how this season started for the Leafs. Joseph Woll had become the number 1 guy. He was having a moment. Max Domi was comparing his composure to Carey Price. Max Domi, of course, the former Canadian. So high praise. And it looked like he had just taken over the net. Then he has that high ankle sprain, in December in Ottawa and never was able to get back on track during the rest of the regular season. He lost 3 games to Boston during the regular season. His last game at TD Garden prior to last night did not go well. In fact, Jeremy Swayman didn't just outplay him. He challenged him to a fight, and that was kind of awkward for Woll. And he won the fight between the pipes last night, and that's got to feel really good. So the goaltending battle that had been going heavily one-sided to the Bruins in this series is all of a sudden feeling a lot different today, Gino, and Joseph Woll is a big reason why.
It is dramatic. The stage is now set. The Leafs go into TD Garden and win one in overtime. Now they're back on home ice with a chance to stay alive and force a Game 7. To do it, though, they're going to have to snap a 6-game losing streak on home ice in the Stanley Cup playoffs.